Hi, this is Gabby, and today I'm going to show you how to build a suppressor for your Benjamin Discovery. I've been building Benjamin Discovery suppressors since 2014, and this video is going to cover how to build version 6, or as I like to call it, the Mark 6. This version is the quietest suppressor I've made to date, but honestly, it's one of the hardest to make. When I designed these suppressor builds, I wanted it to be as easy as possible and not require hundreds or thousands of dollars in equipment to manufacture. That being said, it's going to require some skill to make this thing. It's cheap to make, just not easy to make. You don't need fancy tools to make this, but having fancy tools help. First, you need to remove the front sight mount from your gun. To remove it, use a 5/64 Allen wrench. You're going to need to bring this front sight mount with you when you go to the hardware store next. Okay, so now you're at the hardware store, and the first thing you need to grab is a 1-inch PVC pipe. Most hardware stores will sell a 1 foot or 2 foot long pieces of 1-inch diameter PVC pipe. The next thing you need to get is a 1 by 3/4 inch adapter slip by thread. Now go look for the Schedule 80 PVC nipples that are 3/4 inch diameter. Here's where you need to get your front sight mount and test to see which 3/4 inch nipple your front sight mount will fit inside of. You want the front sight mount to be very snug inside of the nipple. The next thing you need to buy is epoxy. I don't think 14 mLs is enough, especially if you have never used epoxy. I'd get around 25 to 30 mLs instead. So you're also going to need something to help keep the baffles from squeezing together or being blown out the gun. If you have no idea what baffles are, I'll explain it later. What I used as baffle strengtheners or spacers were carpenter pencils, but I don't recommend you do this because they are too big. What I recommend instead are nails, and they got to be at least 3.5 inches long. You'll understand what I'm talking about later in the video. The last thing you need are the special galvanized 3/8 washers. These are the only washers I've found to fit inside of a 1-inch PVC tube, and they kind of fit okay. If I were you, I would take the time to test how they fit inside the pipe, and I would select the ones that were the most snug. That being said, don't be surprised when you find that none of them are snug at all, and that's fine. Okay, so now you're home, and now I want you to screw the nipple into the adapter, making sure you're screwing the correct side of the nipple. Once it's screwed in, cut off the excess of the nipple. Once the nipple is cut, you're going to have to shave off some of the adapter to let the whole thing slide onto the gun once everything is done. If you have a Dremel or a sander, this should be pretty easy, but if you don't, you're going to have to use heat, and you're going to have to heat up the PVC, but carefully so as not to burn the PVC. Then once the PVC is hot enough, you can shave it off using a knife, and you're going to have to do this until you can slide it onto your gun. See, if you don't shave the adapter, then you won't be able to slide your suppressor onto the gun because the fill port will be blocking the adapter. Now it's time to cut your PVC tube. I would make the tube 8 inches long. Okay, so let me now talk more about the design of the suppressor. This is going to be a 3-chamber suppressor, meaning inside of the can there are going to be 3 distinct chambers that are completely separated, except for a small hole that is barely big enough for your pellet to travel through. These distinct chambers are made by something called a baffle. Well, now I want to measure on the can where I want these baffles to go. The 2 dots you see on the can currently is where I want the baffles to go. And now you can kind of see the 3 chambers of the suppressor. Alright, so now let's talk about all the ingredients you should have. You got your epoxy. You got the spacers. Mine are already pre-cut. Don't worry about it. You can cut yours later. Now you got your washers. Then you got your tube with your baffle markings already marked on it. And then lastly, you have your shaven adapter with the nipple already screwed in. final thing you need is a soda can, and you need to cut out the bottom of the can. This soda can bottom will help you form a correct sized baffle for your gun, and you'll see later in the video how big you need to cut the soda can bottom. So here's what the inner design looks like. The washers are the baffles, while in this case the carpenter pencils are the spacers that keep the baffles from being squished. I recommend that you don't use carpenter pencils because they are too big. Use nails or something else to give the washers strength. The soda can bottom goes on top of the baffles and will help form a more effective chamber. I didn't put a soda can bottom at the first washer closest to the barrel because I didn't think it was necessary. If you want to add a soda can bottom there, that's fine, I guess. Tell me about it. Now I'm going to talk about how you should go about building this suppressor. And I think it'll be obvious why I'm doing it this way. So first, epoxy in these spacers first. I made myself a little cardboard gauge to help me figure out how far inside the spacers should go. Epoxy needs around 15 minutes for it to become hard enough to not move easily, but it takes around 24 hours to be at full strength. Do epoxy one spacer, then wait 15 minutes, and then epoxy the second one. Once the spacers have dried for 15 minutes, go ahead and put the washer and soda can bottom on top. When you put the soda can bottom inside, make sure it's concave down relative to the spacers you just put in. Once everything is in place, pour epoxy down the can. I would try to get the epoxy only on the ring of the baffle and not the center of the baffle, but if you get epoxy on the center of the baffle, it's okay. In theory, you would want no epoxy on the center of the baffle, but it actually might be advantageous. I have no idea. Now go ahead and epoxy in the next set of spacers closest to the barrel. When cutting your spacers for the first baffle, don't make the spacers flush with the bottom of the can. Make them just a little bit short so that when you place the washer on top, the washer is flush with the can and not protruding above the can. Making the washer flush with the bottom of the can will give it strength and less likely to blow out under pressure. Once the spacers are epoxied in, go ahead and epoxy the washer, and you see that it is not sticking out above the can. This allows me to put a lot of epoxy and thus make it stronger. So now you have installed everything on the screen, and I want you to wait 24 hours for all the epoxy to dry. If you don't wait 24 hours and you try this next part, then you will probably blow out all your work out of the can. Also note that if you don't put enough epoxy, then you will blow out all your baffles no matter how long you wait for it to dry. Pouring epoxy honestly takes a lot of experience, especially for this kind of application. Epoxy can be very strong, but I wouldn't put it to the test. Alright, so now it's been 24 hours, and this is how I'm going to form the first chamber. I'm going to shoot a pellet through the first baffle to form the baffle's hole. It's very important that you form one baffle at a time and not try to form all three baffles at once. A pellet isn't going to fly straight after it hits a baffle, so it's very important that you only form one at a time. So the first baffle has been formed, and for some reason the hole is way bigger than I expected. I have no idea why it's so big. I'll let you use your imagination. Now it's time to form the second chamber. Remember that you've already epoxied the spacers, so all you gotta do is drop in the washer and soda can bottom and epoxy them in place. After 15 minutes, go ahead and epoxy in the second set of spacers. You can see that I cut them way too long, and I recommend that you don't do that. Cut them short, below the top of the can. Now wait 24 hours for all the epoxy to dry. The second chamber is now formed, and the hole is way better than the first. I accidentally poured a shit ton of epoxy, so the entire baffle was covered. But after 5 minutes of letting it dry, I scratched out the center of the baffle to free it from epoxy. Kind of. there was still epoxy there. After forming the second baffle, go ahead and place the last washer soda can bottom couple on top of this suppressor and epoxy it in place. Now that is what you call a baffle hole. This is the business end of the suppressor, and you're finally done building it. I've been designing and engineering these kind of suppressors for the last 4 years, and this one by far is the best. Let me go ahead and show you. So now I'm going to compare all the suppressors I've ever made. I don't have a dB meter to measure how loud they can get. So what I'll do is I'll shoot towards a microphone that I have 25 yards away and see how loud the shot is through Audacity. It's a special sound program. It's not the best way of testing the effectiveness of a suppressor, but I think it illustrates how well the suppressor works compared to each other and the gun being unsuppressed. So now you see that the newest version of the suppressor I've made is the quietest yet. This version is called the MK6, and I've been developing this kind of homemade suppressor for the Benjamin Discovery for the last 4 years, and you see that I'm getting better. Anyways, I hope this helps you shoot a quieter Discovery. Hey, if you like the kind of videos I make and you are very interested in what I'm doing channel-wise on a weekly basis, you can actually check out my Facebook page, where I do give weekly updates on what I'm doing, what kind of videos I'm making for the following week, and I also like to post cool articles or cool videos that I watch on YouTube, because as much as I make YouTube videos, I probably watch more YouTube videos than I make. But anyways, if you like me enough, check me out. Oh, and thanks for watching.